What's up guys, Nathan here. GGG just announced Path of Exile Harvest, and as usual, I wanted to take some time to talk about my thoughts and concerns regarding the new expansion. There is a lot to go over, including new mechanics, skills, and uniques, so if you haven't seen it already, be sure to check out Ziggy D's preview video as I'll be focusing more on the specific details that interest me personally. Speaking of Ziggy D, I'd like to thank him, GGG, and PC Invasion for all the footage you're about to see. But without further ado, let's jump into the video. Before we get too into the nitty-gritty, here's a quick summary of how Harvest is going to work. In every area in the game, you'll encounter seed caches, or caches as Chris calls them for some reason, which you can simply click on to collect seeds from. Immediately or later on, you'll be able to visit the Sacred Grove, where you can plant said seeds to grow dangerous monsters. Defeating these monsters will primarily yield powerful crafting rewards, along with higher tier seeds and tools to further manage your Sacred Grove. By gradually farming out these high tier seeds, you'll be able to fight 3 new endgame bosses, with a 4th one potentially being available as well. First of all, I just want to say this is exactly the league that I was hoping for. I've always been a fan of these sort of more complex leagues, kind of like Bestiary and Betrayal and Synthesis, leagues that don't reward you so much for just, having the most OP, fastest character possible, but a league that rewards you for taking the time to understand the mechanic and really get out what you put into it. And, this league is literally called Harvest League, and they kind of do the whole reap what you sow theme in the trailer, so I'm guessing that's exactly how it's going to work. I am a little bit worried on behalf of some of the newer players because I know when they introduce complexity like this, these scary UI elements and these scary menus with confusing options on them get a little bit overwhelming, but GGG has assured us that they're going to try to make sure that low-level interaction with the mechanic is also going to be rewarding. So basically, if you're a high-end player who likes to learn and teach yourself complex things, you're going to be rewarded heavily, but if you're a newer player or you just want to kill monsters and get loot, you're also going to be able to get a piece of the pie, so to speak. Speaking of rewards, GGG has teased dozens of new seed crafts, and honestly some of these are like borderline game breaking what they're going to allow you to do with crafting. I don't know how rare some of these are, but even if the least rare looking ones are even remotely common, this is going to completely shake up the crafting meta and provide just brand new avenues for people to create items in ways and sort of entry level costs that we've just never seen before. The first one that I want to talk about seems to be pretty high level though, on that note a little bit different, but it looks like it might be a tier 3 craft based on the cost and sort of the icon on the side. And what it lets you do is it lets you replace a random influence modifier with another. And I think this is a really cool option, especially for high-end crafting. I immediately sort of thought of explodey chests, and I got flashbacks to a Metamorph when I spent 3,000 alteration orbs trying to roll just for that single explodey prefix. And even though it would be very difficult to replace whatever this random Crusader modifier with a different Crusader modifier to hit explodey, it would be just leagues and leagues easier than doing it with just alteration orbs, because you would be only rolling against other influence modifiers. And maybe if it only replaces a prefix with a prefix, or you can fill up your suffixes, that lets you block out another 4 influence modifiers. I don't know if this is even reasonable, if I'm on the right track, but that's sort of just what I thought of as like an immediate way you could apply this to sort of farm out a very rare and desirable prefix to do some self-crafting, or maybe even some crafting per profit, depending on how rare or expensive the seeds involved are with a craft like this. Next up, we have this absolutely insane series of defense-related crafts here, and I think the important takeaway is that they're likely to be tier 1 or at least like cheaper crafts, just based on the sort of non-ornate logo they have on the left side, the little low cost, the 5 on the right side, but these are just absolutely nutty crafts. What I'm guessing here is that what's going to really vary is what the what the value is here in relation to defense. So instead of saying defense, it would say something like life, it would say something like elemental, it might say something like chaos, but the specific things you can do here are just beyond crazy. We have target exalt slamming, crazy in itself. Target divining, great for finishing up items. Target annulling, which lets you, remove things like defense mods. You don't really want a defense mod on a lot of items. And then just target chaos spamming, which is basically like fossil crafting, but through a potentially different, maybe more affordable interface. Basically, to me, this looks like the power of fossil crafting, but sort of fused into a bunch of different currency types, which is mind-boggling. It tells me if these are low-level crafts, like tier 1 crafts, then really just no matter what level you're playing at, you're going to be able to interact with this system and create some just mind-blowing items. And I'm really excited to see if this works and is as accessible as I think it is, just based on the sort of non-ornate menu we're looking at here. Lastly, I want to talk about this oil stack changing mod, and honestly this doesn't seem that exciting right at the sort of forefront of it. It's just a tier 2 craft potentially, and I'm just going off the sort of ornate, but not that intense icon on the left side, as well as the cost sort of being about medium tier. Maybe it's a tier 3, but basically this is just letting you change one stack of oils into a different stack of oils. So you could do something like change a clear stack of oils into maybe a crimson or a black or an opalescent if you get lucky. But what's this telling me is even if you're not interested in directly creating items for yourself or to sell to other players, there's going to be some more, simple crafts that are just going to let you input stuff and get stuff back that you can easily trade for more currency and increase the power level of your character if you're not super keen on understanding or doing some crafting yourself. Additionally, they also showed these crafting rewards that are basically in the same vein, but they showed these on the reveal page itself. But we have this map here, and this map has an enchant that lets you not consume sextants, which may seem, kind of wishy-washy to some players, but for anybody who's done min-maxed endgame mapping, you know that there are some very powerful sextant modifiers in the game. We have sextants that give additional legions. We have the Harbinger currency shard sextant. We have the sextant that also gives the additional currency from nemesis monsters. And if you roll yourself a beautiful quad sextanted up region, it's going to be sad to lose all that. And if it's easy enough to craft this does not consume sextants enchant on your map, you might do that on your batch of burial chambers, toxic sewers, whatever you're running. And then suddenly you can just continue to do that and just reap the rewards of these super rare sextant modifiers that normally would be really difficult and take a long time to roll on your atlas. We also have this tier 16 beachhead with 20 harbingers. For anybody who doesn't know, the regular red tier beachhead is actually a tier 15 and only gives 6 harbingers, and it doesn't have this mod about additional damage and more life, but that is a lot of harbingers, and tier 16 beachhead is a huge deal. You're going to get a lot of map returns from that too, which is very cool. There's also the Gilded Legion Scarab here that they're calling the Jeweled Legion Scarab, and it's basically like your average Gilded Legion Scarab, but instead of adding 1 Legion encounter, it adds 2 Legion encounters, which is extremely efficient. For anybody who's target farming Legion, you know that what you're trying to do is once you roll that sextant modifier, you just grab a few Gilded Legion Scarabs and you're just going to farm the hell out of these Legions. Now you're going to get that additional Legion on the map, which is honestly just crazy. And lastly, this is probably the most unique reward, not one that I'm personally interested in as somebody who's not a huge fan of Lab, but we have this key to a special version of Lab called the Tribute to the Goddess. And only thing that's really different about this is instead of being called the Offering to the Goddess, it's called the Tribute to the Goddess. It has a little bit of a different sprite on it. And then it instead of giving you access to something called the Eternal Labyrinth, it's giving you access to something called the Eternal Labyrinth of Fortune. And Ziggy did ask Chris about this. Chris was kind of coy. He just said, hey, it's like the Eternal Lab, but of Fortune. Who knows what that means? I don't know what that means. I know fortune usually has to do with wealth, and wealth usually has to do with currency. So I'm sure there are some lab farmers here that are getting really excited to see their favorite piece of content actually seeing some love for once. Who knows what this could be? I would absolutely love it to be, consumable enchants that you could drop onto items after the fact. Probably not going to be that. Probably just going to be more currency. Who knows? But these are all very interesting rewards. And my point is, if you're not interested in creating items for yourself or other players, there's going to be some stuff that you can just put in currency and get currency out very simply, a little bit indirectly, but it's going to be really cool for a lot of players. The last note I have in regards to the rewards for this league is that I have a feeling that this league, much like Synthesis, Betrayal, and Bestiary, is going to be a league that the people that can figure out how to exploit the most profitable crafts early on are going to literally be printing mirrors. Back in Synthesis, it was people who figured out how to do arcane surge rings, onslaught boots. Back in Betrayal, it's people who figured out the power of the research and incursion branches. Bestiary, it was the classic splitting the chest so you could generate basically infinite 6 links just by buying cheap beasts. Whoever can figure this out early on, there's probably just going to be a handful of players or a guild or something, is going to make a lot of currency. The one thing that I really hope to sort of counter this is that I hope there's a really nice variety of crafts, because the more powerful and interesting and different and varied crafts that are available to us, the longer it's going to take for people to think that they quote unquote solved the mechanic, and the more interesting the league is going to be, especially from a trade league perspective. So in my last video, I complained a little bit about Delirium cluster jewels, and I basically said that I hoped the Delirium was not going to go core in really any sense at all. However, I also recognize this was a very unreasonable and borderline unpopular request, although the comments did kind of echo my sentiment. I was a little bit surprised on that. So I suggested as an alternative that cluster jewels should just drop everywhere in the game. Basically, you don't have to interact with Delirium. You can get cluster jewels just by playing, and that they should be more common, and that most importantly, notable stacking just be completely removed and the regular skill tree would become more appealing due to that. And what I want to say in regards to that is it seems like GGG read my mind, watched my video or something, and then just took all of my ideas and were like, hey, these are nice. Here's like 10 times better solutions to everything you just suggested. First of all, instead of making cluster jewels, just drop from everywhere, they make them only drop from Delirium, but give them a guaranteed drop rate of every 4 rewards. So basically, as long as you interact with Delirium, if you can push like a reasonable amount of reward tiers, and I think just in a softcore trade, any softcore trade build that's halfway decent should be getting a guaranteed 1 to 3 cluster jewels every time you walk through that mirror and just play with the mechanic, which is, even though I don't love Delirium as a mechanic because of how ridiculous it can make things be and how rippy they can make maps, it's, pretty nice to get guaranteed rewards from anything. You just go in, you do the mechanic, you get your clusters, you get out. They're also making Delirium, instead of being a basic 10% league mechanic, how they did with Metamorph, Legion, all that stuff. It's actually a multiplicative chance to appear on your maps depending on how many other mechanics are on your map, which really just makes sense because at the end of the day, Delirium is a multiplier on everything you're already doing. So if you start dropping Legions in, you start dropping Abysses, Breaches, there's going to be an escalating chance for the Delirium to appear, and then that also kind of feeds back into the guaranteed cluster jewels drop of every 4 rewards. So basically, the more mechanics you put on your map, the more reward tiers you're actually going to be able to hit, which means the more reliable cluster jewels you're going to get just by juicing up your map. So at the end of the day, even though you still have to interact with Delirium, you're also indirectly able to get cluster jewels by interacting with the rest of the game. And lastly, this is the part that I'm most excited and impressed about. Instead of nerfing cluster jewels super heavily, they're obviously going to be nerfing things like Cry Wolf and Purposeful Harbinger. What's really going to be crazy is they actually decided they're going to buff the hell out of the skill tree. They're like, instead of nerfing clusters into the ground or preventing notable stacking, they're going to make the base skill tree far more appealing. And this is what I really like to see, because I think the base skill tree is really interesting. If you want to go watch my video where I complain about Delirium, I talk about it a little bit, but I think the base skill tree is really interesting. It's a bit of a puzzle to kind of figure out the best places to go for the various starting classes. But if they buff the base skill tree, then suddenly clusters are going to become less of a sort of guaranteed thing for every single build. Like one socket voices is what you should be doing on everything build. Suddenly you're going to have to start thinking a little bit more and consider the base skill tree versus the power of clusters. And they're even bringing in some timeless keystones, which addresses a little bit of the power creep I spoke about in regards to timeless jewels. So you're going to be able to get things like Glancing Blows, the Agnostic, and Supreme Ego. I hope Supreme Ego, this is just tentative based on a screenshot, but I really hope Supreme Ego makes it onto the tree, because that's a notable that's always been a little bit awkward to fit onto a timeless jewel, especially because it comes from the Eternal Empire timeless jewel, which changes all of the nodes, which makes it super weird to fit in. But it's very strong for things like mind over matter trappers and miners, and even mind over matter totem builds. And I like to play those kinds of builds, so it'd be very strong to get a nice little 50% more aura effect on the tree for builds like that. Honestly, this is an amazing solution to all the issues I spoke about in my last video, and I'm just like more than floored with GGG's solution, and I'm just really glad I'm not the one developing this game, because they really know what they're doing, and I'm really excited to see how Delirium goes core and just how far they go with this base tree buffing and reworking that they've spoken about. For the last part of this video, I want to talk about some of the new and reworked skills that were showcased in the reveal. First of all, it looks like two-handers in general are finally getting some serious love across the board, and they did speak about just generic buffs. I don't know if they're going to literally say, okay, 20% more damage for all two-handers, if they're going to buff the base types, but that's really exciting to see. I'm really excited to see two-handers just getting a little bit of love in general. They also decided they're going to classify a lot of skills as slam skills, and I think they've confirmed that Earthquake, Ground Slam, Tectonic Slam, and I believe Ice Crash and Sunder are also going to be under those categories, but slam skills are going to get a little bit of love in the form of a new support gem called Fist of War, which is kind of like Mirage Archer / Ancestral Call, but for AoE melee skills. And what it does is every couple seconds when you attack with your slam skill of choice, you're going to get a huge more damage and more AoE buff on that attack. So if you watch some of this footage here, it looks like the guy's walking around, he's hitting, and then, he hits one time and he just gets this huge, almost like Vol-sized AoE on your hit. And you can already get some really crazy AoE on things like Vol Ground Slam, so this is going to be absolutely nutty, the amount of AoE you're going to be getting here. I can't really speak to the amount of damage we're going to be getting on two-handers in general or slam skills in general, but I can see the AoE that's been teased so far is just mind-blowing. I wasn't around here for the pre-AoE nerfs of way back in the day, so I'm ready to get to experience that a little bit again, maybe at least just 1% of what it used to be in the form of some really fun slam skills. My only complaint here, and this isn't really a complaint, it's just a bit of a concern, is that I'm worried that strike skills might again be left a little bit in the dust, and I know that some strike skills do see some play, especially like Flicker Strike and Vol Double Strike, but as far as the more ethical sort of generic strike skills, for example, dual strike or, God forbid, heavy strike, those skills have kind of just been left in the dust a little bit. I know they've tried with things like Hunter Gloves and Awaken Ancestral Call, but they just need a little bit more love, in my opinion. I think slam skills are definitely going to be taking the focus away from things like strike skills and hopefully Cyclone as well. You win some, you lose some, but I would like to play a heavy strike build that doesn't feel like I'm just playing a worse version of so many other melee builds. War-Cries are also being reworked, which is a huge deal to me personally. If you guys don't know, I'm a huge fan of War-Cries, but the current state of War-Cries is a bit of a mess. You either have the borderline useless, which is you just use Enduring Cry, to try to keep endurance charges up while mapping, or completely overpowered, where you stack Cry Wolves and you get hundreds and hundreds of percent generic increased damage no matter what kind of build you're playing. They're actually adding 4 new War-Cries and reworking some existing War-Cries, and the one I'm personally the most interested in that they've teased so far is called Seismic Cry, and basically what that does is it knocks enemies back a little bit, taunts them towards you, which is just kind of a weird unnecessary effect in my opinion, but whatever. The exciting part is it makes your next few attacks gain more damage and more area of effect, and I assume this is going to scale with some cooldown recovery. So if you don't have like super fast attack speed, which you shouldn't if you're playing these new big two-hander slam skills, and then you get a nice amount of cooldown recovery on your Seismic Cry, you should be able to get close to permanent uptime while mapping, because you hit once, the whole screen is dead. You hit once, you hit the second time, whole screen's dead. You keep going, and then by the time you hit that 4th time and you need to refresh your Seismic Cry, it's up again. I don't know. It just looks really exciting to me. It looks like it could be really fun, especially coupled with Fist of War. We're going to see some really funny big AoEs. At least I hope so. Lastly, we have the most exciting skill-related announcement for me, and that is we are finally getting a little bit more brand love. We're getting a new brand called Penance Brand, which is a little bit different from existing brand mechanics. What it is you drop it on an enemy, and it kind of starts spreading on its own, almost like Arc, you could say, but it spreads, it multiplies, it divides, but it doesn't actually deal damage until you remove it. You remove it by using Brand Recall to sort of move it somewhere else, by casting another brand that removes it from your maximum brand limit. Or I think you can also, an enemy can die, and that also counts as it being removed, and then that will cause it to detonate. And they didn't show a lot of dense packs, so we don't know exactly how strong this mechanic is going to be, but I have a feeling if they get the feeling on this skill right, it's going to be a little bit delayed of damage, but when it goes off, you're going to get some really cool, satisfying chains. And as a bonus to this, it is also a physical to lightning conversion spell, which, in case you guys didn't know, has like already the most nutty damage potential just from a mechanical standpoint. We have just stat sticks, we have things like Eternity Shroud. It's really easy to get insane damage out of physical to lightning converted spells. We also have Arcanist Brand, which is basically brand support, something that we've been begging for a very long time. And what it is it's brand support. You link a spell, you link a couple spells to it, and when it triggers, or you use it, you cast it like a regular brand and it activates, it triggers linked spells in a sequence. So I'm guessing that means you can link several spells if you want to link a bunch of spells, or you can just link your favorite spell and make some really fun brand builds. They showed off a little bit of footage here on the PC Invasion footage that I'm looking at, and unfortunately, even though I thought Purifying Flame would be really strong, the footage on Purifying Flame is not looking that good. Maybe they're not using a high level gem to get all that extra radius, but yeah, I really want to try Purifying Flame, Arcanist Brand, Blamefall, Glacial Cascade. There's a lot of cool stuff you could do with Arcanist Brand, and I'm really excited to see what people come up with. Bex was also teasing a Cold Brand. We don't have any details other than wait for more news on this, and then also they said we would be getting 3 new brand skills, and they've only shown us 2, so we're probably going to be getting a Cold Brand as well. I don't know how strong it's going to be. I don't know anything about it. But if brands even manage to be even remotely as fun as they are right now, combined with Shatters, Herald of Ice, have a pretty fun recipe brewing here. So I'm really excited to see what this Cold Brand is. The one thing I will add here is I'm a little bit worried about how they're reworking brands, both in the reveal page for Harvest and in the interview with Chris Wilson. They mentioned that they're going to be doing some core mechanic reworking on brands, and I'm a little bit worried about that, not because I personally will be upset if they rework brands, but I know a lot of people love the sort of smooth play style that is Archmage Stormbrand, or even just regular Stormbrand, where you basically cast your Stormbrands and then you just run through the map, mashing brand recall, and it's a very smooth play style. I know a lot of people love it, and I'm worried if they rework it too heavily, they're going to turn off a lot of brand lovers. Maybe they'll bring some new people into the mix, but they're definitely going to lose some old people if they nerf brand recall a little bit too much. We'll see how it works out. It's just something that I'm a little bit aware of for those of you who just absolutely love playing Stormbrand. Anyway, guys, that's about all I have for you today. I'm extremely excited about Harvest. I'm excited for new brand skills, War-Cry skills, the reworked passive tree. Everything about this league is so exciting for me. Even if it does end up being a flop for whatever reason, I think it's really cool. GGG is always out here experimenting, trying to introduce new stuff to us. And this announcement has me more hyped than probably any other league announcement to date. Just about everything they spoke about happened to be right up my alley. So I don't know, maybe they read my mind or just giving me what I want, but I'm really excited for more news and, of course, upcoming Bex teasers. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name's Nathan, and I'll see you next time.
Goodbye, not a cockroach.
Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters, Real Human, Zikrax, Wally, Zoljan, Coda, Julia Allen, Keplerk, Sparky Kata, Heiser801, Kyle, Logan, Ice Dude, Ginzink Anonymous, Alex, Orangina, Marius, Bombfair, and Lloyd. You guys are fantastic. Thank you so much for supporting me. If anyone else is interested in checking them out Patreon, you can check me out at patreon.com/NathanBrotherBob. I also have my Discord there in the top right hand corner. If you don't feel like giving me monies, that's fine too. You can come hang out in my community. We talk about Path of Exile. You know, we all watched the trailer together when Harvest was released. Super fun place to be. Highly recommend joining up there. If you want to check me out on Twitch, I stream every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 2 p.m. Central Time. Usually, although my schedule has been a bit questionable lately. And then you can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at NathanBroBob and Instagram respectively. Thank you guys again. Really appreciate all the support, and I will see you guys very soon with Harvest League starters.